listen.
Those on the West Coast.
Sorry, Dan, you were muted, and I just unmuted you.
Oh, okay. Very good. Very good. Thanks very much, Jennifer, and to all of our participants as well as our presenters. I think that this is a very important webinar for you to participate in. And as we look at supporting youth mental health during COVID-19, the questions come very fast and very often from the standpoint of what does that look like and why is this important? And it's even more important now than it's ever been. As we look at our strategic plan, in addition to our COVID-19 focus, our strategic plan, which takes us from 2020 through 2025, is looking at the voices of youth and early intervention. And so this topic and your engagement is very important to us, and having your voices is critical here. And that's why we have 3 presenters here that are your voices and are going to be speaking to this topic in NAMI's Ending the Silence. And that's Hannah Bott from NAMI North Texas. Hello, Hannah. Mitch Kusick from NAMI Colorado. Hi, Mitch. And Katie Donohue from NAMI Greater Orlando. They're all trained presenters in NAMI's Ending the Silence. And it is about talking, it is about discussions, and it is about ending the silence. So with that said, it's time for me to turn it over to Katie Donohue. Katie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie. I will introduce myself just a little bit. I live down here in Orlando, Florida. I went to the University of Central Florida, where I studied psychology and creative writing. Other than that, I am an artist, a writer, a singer, and a very aggressive Harry Potter fan. But yeah, that's the important stuff. So what I really want to do is start by asking you guys a question. Has there ever been anything that you wanted to get, or something that you wanted to achieve, and maybe you felt like there was a roadblock in front of you that was stopping you from getting whatever it is? You know, maybe for the teens who are watching this, or if you guys can remember when you were younger, it was trying to get on a sports team or a part in a play, or trying to get a good grade in that really tough class. And maybe for some of our adults, it's been having enough money to go on that vacation or get that car, that house. Maybe for some of you guys, it's something a bit deeper, like acceptance or love from your friends or your family members. And maybe for some of you, it's just happiness. For me, that's what it was. I had a lot of trouble just being happy. But if you had known me when I was growing up, I was a huge jokester, huge class clown. I smiled way too much, laughed way too much, joked around way too much. I was always perpetually in detention because I was hilarious, and my teachers did not think that I was hilarious. And so for all you educators out there, on behalf of all of your really bad, unruly students, I am personally so sorry. But, you know, that was when other people were around. When it was just me, I felt like I was behind that roadblock, kind of watching everybody else be genuinely happy. So the first time I thought about taking my own life and took action to see what that might be like, I was really small, like about 5 or 6 years old. And I learned through NAMI National, actually, through some literature that I was reading a few years ago, that 1% of children under the age of 10 can experience thoughts and feelings like that. And I was in that 1%. And from there, I feel like my circumstances just got worse. And maybe many of you can really relate. My parents divorced, and my mom, living with her own diagnoses of mental illness, often neglected me. This means that we did not always have food in the home, and I did not get medical treatment when I genuinely needed it. She became pregnant with a man that I did not know, and they could both be violent and abusive. They both abused alcohol and other substances. And from the way my mom treated me, I felt like she must hate me. And so by the time my baby brother was born, I felt like it was up to me to take care of him, and I was only 12 years old. So what that means was I changed his diapers, and I fed him formula milk when he was a baby, and then moved on to baby food when he got older, and then regular food as he got even older. I took care of him when he was sick, and he was sick all the time. He was a very sickly child. I taught him manners. I disciplined him. I did fun stuff with him too. I taught him how to swim, how to ride a bike. When I could drive, I dropped him off at school, and I picked him up from school. And by the time he was 4 years old, he was still calling me mommy. And I had to remind him that I'm sissy. So even in middle school, I could tell that something wasn't right. I remember going to my mom and I would say, I think there's something wrong with me. I think I need to see someone. I need to get some help. And I was only 11, 12, 13 years old when I would come to her and say these things. So I had really no idea what was wrong with me, and I had no idea what kind of help I needed or who I needed to see, but I was very aware that my happiness was different than the happiness of my friends and my classmates. By the time I was in high school, I was 14 years old, freshman, and I was 100% sure. I knew with absolute certainty that I was not going to live to see my senior year. I started abusing my body with things like alcohol, cigarettes, medication, self-harm. I stopped doing everything that I loved, things I had done all my life, like basketball, theater, music, dancing. And it didn't help that from 6th grade straight through high school, I felt really relentlessly, daily picked on and bullied at school. And although all of this was going on, nobody, not even my best friends in the world, knew anything about it. I was an expert at hiding my home life. I was an expert at hiding my scars from self-harm. I wore bracelets to cover them up, and I still do, just out of habit. And I did that because I felt like nobody knew what I was going through. Nobody was going through the same thing, and nobody was talking about it. No one was talking about mental health. And so I felt like if I did open up to somebody, they weren't going to understand. They weren't going to get it. They weren't going to get me. And so I ended up burying it and keeping it to myself, which makes it, probably as we know, a whole lot worse. So when I was a junior, I was 16, and I remember I got into this really terrible argument in the car with my mom. And I basically told her that I was miserable and that I was going to take my own life. And to this day, I can never forget how she responded. She screamed at me and she cursed at me, and she got right in my face and she said, if you're that crazy, if you're that much of a lunatic, then go ahead and do it. Kill yourself. And after that, I'd given up. And because of that, my dad stepped in and got me into treatment for the first time ever, into counseling with a therapist for a start, which was one of the most amazing things that happened to me in high school. One of the most amazing things that my dad ever did for me. I don't know if I would have said it back then, because I don't know if you guys have ever been a teenager and gone to counseling, but like super awkward, and teenagers in general were awkward, and so it was good though. Turned out to be good, obviously. In counseling, I was taught coping skills. I was able to sit down with a therapist and just talk about what I'd been going through, what I'd been feeling all my life, and she was there to listen and unjudgmentally and walk alongside me through those problems. I was encouraged to open up to my friends about some of the things that were going on so that I was not doing life alone anymore, and pursue the things that I had stopped doing, the things that I loved. I got really into things like meditation and exercising. I was pursuing my own personal faith in Christianity, and all that put together is why I get to sit here in front of you guys today and not be buried in a graveyard somewhere down here in Florida. And so, all this to say, I would like to point out that, when you live with a mental illness, recovery is not linear. I would later still go on to struggle with depression and suicidal ideations, and anxiety and panic attacks and eating disorders and PTSD. But, when you live with something like mental illness, whether it be any of these things, bipolar disorder, borderline, there's so many mental illnesses. Every day can be a struggle. Every week, every month, it gets better, and then it gets worse, and then it gets better, and then it gets worse, but it gets better, and it keeps getting better. And so if you flash forward to today, I still go to therapy every single week. I am 23 years old. I decided to study psychology, and now I am finishing up my master's degree in mental health counseling. So now I'm on the other side of the counseling room, and people come and they sit down on a couch and they tell me all the bad things that have ever happened to them, and I personally love it. I think it's a great time. But I've also gotten to work for NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, for the last 5 years, and who, as we know, does such amazing work for individuals that live with mental illness and their family members. And so now I'm a presenter for them, and I've gotten to speak locally here down in Greater Orlando, but on the statewide and on the national level as well, through all amazing people who provide these opportunities. So, on the topic of coronavirus, when that happened, I was naive to thinking that I would not be so affected, right? I've been in therapy like pretty much all my life. Like, I know I'm like the queen of self-care. Like, there's no way coronavirus is going to affect me. I had no heightened anxiety, no panic attacks, no serious episodes of depression. And then toxic thinking and toxic behaviors relating to eating disorder recovery that I've been into the last 3 years started to slip into my head and slip into my actions. And I was like, like, red light, caution, something is wrong. This is bad. And I remember that 3 things needed to happen in this moment. 1, I needed to have compassion for myself. 2, I needed to believe in myself that this is something that I'm going to get through. And 3, I needed to do something to make a change. And so I tried to remember what my therapist once told me. She said, what if you looked at yourself with compassion and curiosity and not condemnation? Because it's easy to get down on ourselves when, we've worked hard in recovery and then we end up taking a few steps backwards. And so I remember, going to my roommate and I said, I actually feel really good. I feel like I'm feeling good about this because I felt like I was looking my demons in the eyes and I knew I was stronger than they were this time. So I started reminding myself of some simple things related to eating disorder recovery. One being that food is fuel, and that is okay. That when I'm hungry, it's my body telling me she needs fuel, and that is okay. That when I go exercise, I do it for fun. I play music that I love. I get outside in the sunshine, and that's okay. That, reminding myself that my lifestyle had changed. I was no longer going to work. I was no longer going to school, physically, and I was at home a lot more. And so if my lifestyle changed, my body was going to change, and that is okay. And I was thinking about how far I've come in recovery and how much more happier I am in recovery and hanging on to that hope and that goal of this is what I'm working towards, is staying healthy. And what was also helpful is I started following other eating disorder survivors on social media and reading what they were going through as they got triggered and reading their affirmations every day on how they were staying healthy. And lastly, I told the people that I was closest with, people that were going to check up on me and be compassionate towards me. And aside from that, like I said, I'm the queen of self-care. I start every day with like yoga and journal and reading anyways. So I had to reinvent my toolkit pretty much. But, all this to say, find what works for you. Reach out for help. And I want you guys to know that if you experience anything that I said, or you experience anything that we talk about in today's presentation, I want you guys to know that there is a community of people out there who genuinely care. And it's NAMI. NAMI is this national community that cares. And, that in case you forget, because it's easy to forget, that you are loved even when you don't feel it. You are valued even if you don't believe it. And you are worthy of living joyfully. And there is a life worth loving out there, even if we have to create it. So Thank you guys for listening to my long-winded speech. I'm glad my cat didn't jump on my laptop while it was happening. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the presentation. I'm going to pass it off to Hannah.
Hi guys, Katie, thank you so much. That was amazing. And Katie, people like Katie and the stories that we share, that's the entire reason I love NAMI so much. And so it's really like such a joy to hear such different perspectives from outside of where I live. And so to tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Hannah. I'm the outreach coordinator at NAMI North Texas and the Ending the Silence coordinator, but I came in as a volunteer. So being here and being able to speak to you guys today and talking about mental health, it's just so exciting for me. So I'm really happy to introduce Youth Speak, supporting youth mental health during COVID-19. I'm going to be talking a little bit about, just starting with the basics. What is mental health? What are mental health conditions? We're going to talk a little bit about warning signs and then finish up with how to help someone, how to reach out. And during this, I'll put a little bit of my own story in here because the one thing that I want you to walk away knowing is that all three of us, and you'll hear Mitch at the end, all three of us have lived experience, and that is why NAMI is so important, because we are coming from a lived experience place, hoping to support the community, the mental health community and their families with free support groups, programs, awareness events like this. And so I hope you guys enjoy. So as we're moving on to what is mental health, well, first thing, mental health is the health of your mind. We all have mental health, like we all have physical health, the health of your body. And being mentally healthy, it doesn't mean that you don't get overwhelmed or you don't get stressed out or you don't have emotions like sadness and anger. It means that you have positive ways to deal with those emotions and you're able to enjoy life and feel good. And being mentally healthy can be maintained with good habits. And we're going to be talking about some of those, some positive coping skills and what that looks like. But when you start to feel that it maybe is taking over your daily life, or that maybe you aren't feeling those better feelings more often than the others, we're going to start looking into mental health conditions. Mental health conditions are medical conditions, like physical conditions. They are conditions that change the way that people feel, think, and act, and they're common and treatable. And I always say, let's say that you break your leg, right? You're going to go to the doctor, they're going to take an x-ray, they're going to give you some sort of treatment plan, hopefully pain medication because that has got to hurt, right? But then they're going to figure out, like, do you need physical therapy? Do you need something more? And then they're going to check in with you periodically to make sure that you're getting better. When you have a mental health condition, getting treatment can be much the same way. You go to the doctor and you talk to them. That's like their x-ray. They're going to figure out some sort of treatment plan for you, whether that is therapy or a combination of therapy and medication. Whatever you, your doctor, and your family feel comfortable with, and then they're going to check in with you, or you're going to check in with a therapist to make sure that you're periodically getting better. What mental health conditions are not, they're not anyone's fault. They're nothing to be ashamed of. I hope that Katie, Mitch, and I can show you that we're willing to talk about it, and they're not limiting. If you receive early intervention, if we can get to the problem early enough, we can really help you get to that place where you're feeling good and you're able to take care of your mental health. Katie said it best when she said that recovery is not linear. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but it's so true. But there are tools to help us to maintain healthy habits. If I were there with you in person, and I'm still going to ask, I would ask, what is the most surprising statistic on this page? What to you is most surprising? Let me give you just a second to kind of look over these. The first thing I really want you guys to know is that mental health conditions in young adults are common. There is a misconception. I think there has been. As much as I love you guys for thinking I'm a young adult, I was in school in the 90s, back in the day, and that's when I started getting those feelings of anxiety, and I was later diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. But back in the 90s, we didn't talk about youth and mental health. Back in the 90s, it was, her tummy hurts. Maybe she should go see an optometrist for her eyesight. Maybe she needs eyeglasses. So this is a lot of the rhetoric that I heard. But young adults do have mental health, because we all have mental health, and that's something that we need to also be aware of, that mental health conditions are common in young adults. So we're seeing 1 in 6 young adults between the ages of 6 and 17 who are experiencing some sort of mental health struggle within a year. And to give you an idea, I told you guys that I started experiencing this in 4th grade. My own daughter, who's 7, we started noticing this when she was 5, and she was diagnosed also with generalized anxiety disorder when she was 6. So this has really shown in our lives. Also, this half of all lifetime cases that begin before the age of 14, I think Katie probably can attest to that being a part of her mental health as well. And I always tell students, this is not the sad part. The sad part is that 50% of young adults who are within these numbers are not getting any treatment. 50%. Why wouldn't someone get the help that they need? And when I propose this question, the thing that we're looking for is for everyone to say stigma. And it's so true. Stigma is the biggest reason someone wouldn't get the help that they need. But when I asked this question at a high school within the past year, I had a young lady raise her hand and she said, the reason I didn't get help is because I didn't know there was anything to be worried about. And she ended up being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So she thought, in her words, her manic stages and her low lows, because she did experience depression with her bipolar disorder, was normal. And it was normal to feel up and down, because she didn't know the warning signs and she didn't know much about mental health in general. So when you intervene early enough, we can take care of those really serious long-term consequences that could be, like the 70% of youth in the juvenile justice system that are diagnosed with mental illness, 70% of youth in juvenile justice, and the 17% of high school students which seriously consider suicide. We're going to talk about the warning signs in a second, and I think Jennifer told you guys somewhere in here, up or down, there are documents. There's Ending the Silence for families and Ending the Silence for staff. And on both of these sheets are 10 complete warning signs. I always like to say they're 10 tangible warning signs. But before we jump in there, I really want to break it down that when we're thinking about a typical childhood experience versus an atypical childhood experience when experiencing these symptoms, we're looking at the intensity, the duration, and the level of distress. And I say that because once you start reading those symptoms, you're going to look at me and you're going to say, I think I've seen all of this in my point or another, or I think I've experienced all of this at one point within myself. But we're looking at how severe are the symptoms, how long do they last, and how much do they impair daily functioning. When I started with those tummy aches in 4th grade, I didn't just have it once in a while. They were consistent pains every single day. They lasted for months, for a year, and then they really kept me from doing the things that I love to do. When I think about my own daughter, Mia, and the experiences that we've seen, I started noticing the tummy aches in her as well. Her symptoms were so severe with the tummy aches. They were every day. She stopped eating lunch at school, and then she started feeling really uncomfortable in her clothes. I started noticing that coupled with tantrums lasting hours within a day, multiple days within a week, where we're having more tantrums within a week than without. And she wasn't going out to see her friends. She wasn't leaving the house, and she was only 5, 6 years old. There was definitely something that needed to be done, and so we were able to get her treatment and take her to play therapy and occupational therapy. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So these are 5 of the 10 warning signs. If you're looking at that sheet, or if you can download that sheet, this is a really helpful thing to have. These are 5 of the 10 warning signs, and I really like to start with the first one, feeling very sad or withdrawn for more than 2 weeks. Notice that it says more than 2 weeks. It's not asking you to live with pain or with suffering or sadness or withdrawal for many, many months or many, many years. If you notice that you're very sad, isolated, withdrawn, and you're just not feeling the same way that you have been, and it's been more than 2 weeks, we urge you to go and see someone. Severe, out-of-control, risk-taking behaviors that can cause harm to self or others. The third one is sudden, overwhelming fear for no reason. I will tell you, since COVID-19 happened, or since it started, my daughter almost on the daily wakes up in the morning, says, my throat is sore, can you get your flashlight and look at it? She's very fearful of coronavirus, even though she doesn't quite understand it. In fact, she saw a little boy out and he said, can we play? And she goes, if you stay 6 feet away from me. I don't know why you have to stay 6 feet away from me, but you need to stay 6 feet away from me. So she is very well aware that there's something going on and it's making her really uncomfortable. That physical discomfort that's a part of that third one is what I experienced as early as 4th grade, which later changed into muscle tightness. And I don't know if y'all have noticed, but sometimes I have to stop and really take a deep breath because my breathing is really shallow. That kind of comes from what I call my brand of anxiety, and just something I kind of live with. Seeing, hearing, or believing things that aren't real, and then finally drastic changes in mood, behavior, personality, or sleeping habits. What I noticed in Katie's story is that she definitely had mood and behavior and personality changes. She wasn't playing basketball anymore, which is something she loved, and there were lots of changes happening. These are things that maybe her friends noticed, but didn't really know how to bring that up to her, or they probably knew that something was a little off, but didn't quite know how to start that conversation. So we hope by sharing these warning signs that this will kind of show you, even if you're not feeling it yourself, but maybe a friend is, what might be going on and a way to start the conversation. I also want to point out in the last 5 that we won't be showing today but are on your sheet, the 3 on there, which is about eating disorders as well as extreme use of drugs and alcohol and self-harm. Those are not only warning signs, but those are negative coping skills. And so if you notice that in anyone, it's important to get them help right away. So if you do notice this, and I know that we have a range of people, we have young adults, we have parents, we have grandparents, I'm sure, but what can you do? As a young adult, first thing I'm going to tell you to do is talk to someone that you trust. And if I were there with you in person, I would say, who is someone that you trust? Can you think of anyone, an adult that you trust? And I would give you a second, you'd raise your hand, or maybe you wouldn't. And then I would say to you, think about mom, dad, think about aunt, uncle, but then think about big sister, big brother, coaches, teachers, your administrators at school, your assistant principals. There are a wealth of adults that you can speak to. And I always say, if you go to one person and it's not exactly what you need, try another. If you notice that a friend is going through some of those warning signs, I think one of the things that I would have done if I was Katie's friend, knowing what I know now, of course, because I didn't have this as a kid, I would want to talk to her. I would say, hey, I've noticed that you haven't been showing up to basketball. Is everything okay? And I'm here to listen, and just come from a really non-judgmental way. I'm a writer, so sending a message to someone who cares about me is I just love to write, and that is one way that I do connect with people. And sometimes, and it's funny because I talked with some friends about this yesterday, I feel like a burden. And I realized quickly after writing someone and hearing the response back that I'm not, and they are happy to help me and to be a friend to me. Also, we usually give out cards on the resources that we gave you. Those would be the cards. I want you to use those resources. Call NAMI, and I always love to give the crisis text number 741-741, and we'll get to a resource list at the end as well. For those of you wondering, so how do I start this conversation? It's not happening to me, it's happening to a friend, or I notice some differences in my own child. I think the most important thing is that your role isn't to diagnose the child. We're not asking anyone to be diagnosticians, but we're asking you to say, hey, I'm coming to you just to check on you. And that doesn't bring any bad will. It's hey, I've noticed that some things are going on, and I want to be here for you. And you can talk to me. And if you're not comfortable with me, please let me help you find someone that you are. I love these bubbles because they do give a lot of help with what do you say now? You've noticed, and what do you say? So I hope that these will help you as well. If you're concerned about someone, the most important thing I always tell people is, how are you? No, how are you really? That's when I first was able to start talking, was when someone looked me straight in the face and said, no, how are you really? And I was able to say, you know what, I'm just not doing very well. When we talk about mental health conditions, it's important to talk about suicide. And, suicide is complicated. And it's not caused by just one event. It's, not caused by a fight with a friend or just a breakup or one thing. It's often caused by an underlying mental health condition, which can really prevent someone from thinking clearly and rationally. And you can't always tell when someone's thinking about suicide. Sometimes these warning signs can be really subtle. So, as you're thinking about this, also know that sometimes you might not see all of these things, but these are things to be really, really concerned about. Talking, writing, drawing about death, talking about having no reason to live. Why am I even here? My parents don't care if I'm around. I'm just a burden to them. Looking for ways. One of the things that I did in my own story, I talk a little bit about when I started thinking about seriously considering suicide, I started Googling ways to die by suicide. Feeling hopeless, giving away possessions, or lengthy goodbyes. Someone pointed that out once to me, these goodbyes that seem to be farewells, and that's something to be aware of as well. And then anyone who's behaving recklessly. Trust your instincts. Trust, that what you know about this person, and don't be afraid to really look at it deeply. We ask that if you see these warning signs of suicide, that you take them very seriously and you take action immediately. This is probably one of the hardest things I'm going to ask you to do, but if you notice that anyone is thinking about suicide, I want you to ask them the question, are you thinking about suicide? And that seems weird, right? Because you're like, wait, am I going to put the idea in their head? You're not. You're going to show them that you care enough to ask the hard questions, and that you're willing to go into that in-depth conversation with them. Ask them the question, are you thinking about suicide? Don't leave them alone. If you're a young adult, please tell an adult that you trust. Call the National Suicide Lifeline if there's no one around and you need to reach out to someone immediately. There's that 741 number, that crisis text line. You can text NAMI, you can text hello, whatever you need to 741-741, and there's another person, a real-life person, trained on the other side of that text. If it's a true emergency or you just don't know where else to go, the emergency room or 911 is there. But most importantly, please don't keep warning signs a secret. Even if you're begged, even if your friend says, please, please don't tell anyone, because it's much better to have your friend upset with you than to not have your friend here anymore. And I've even had adult staff members ask me, well, wait, but I don't want the students to think they can't trust me. In this case, this is not a time for them to think that that they need to trust that you'll keep their secret. They need to trust in you that you're going to keep them safe. So please, please think about that as you're thinking about suicide and what to do with the warning signs. So we talked a lot about what is mental health, what are mental health conditions. We talked about warning signs as well, but really there are ways to make symptoms better. I mean, recovery is not impossible. In fact, it's very possible. And we know that earlier that you get help, the better. There's tons of different types of therapy. I myself go to talk therapy. My daughter goes to play therapy. She also goes to occupational therapy. I think I mentioned some of the sensory stuff. She has a bit of sensory processing struggles, and that is really a manifestation of her anxiety. So I will tell you, I don't know if it's genetic or what, but my girl and I both feel our anxiety very physically. So that is an actual symptom as well. There's art therapy, pet therapy, non-traditional therapies like mindfulness and that meditation, the art of meditation. And then there's medication. And that is a choice that you make with your doctor and your family present, and you can talk about, for me, I do take medication and it helps me, but I also couple that with therapy and spend a long time talking to my doctors to make sure that was the right choice for me. Along with treatment and just knowing that the earlier the better, we also want to point out positive coping strategies. And this is my favorite whenever I'm in a classroom, because I'm always like, what are your favorite things to do? Because on top of getting enough sleep and also exercising and eating healthy, which I should probably put down the cookies on that one, but on top with those, like, what do you love to do? I love to write and I love to read. So right now I'm currently reading a self-help book. I'm trying to be like Katie level self-help, like connoisseur, like amazing. And so I am like taking notes, and I'm writing like little Post-it notes as a part of it, and just really getting into it. But I've heard kids say anything from they love playing Madden to they love art, music, and sports and running, crazy things like that, like running. I have not learned that art yet. But one of the things I am doing is also building miniature houses, which sounds really strange, but for me, with my anxiety, it really helps me to concentrate on something. And then I also color with my daughter, which is a lot of fun. So there are ways to make symptoms better. There are positive coping strategies. And if you remember, we talked about negative coping strategies before with the 3 warning signs at the end. And then Katie also talked about some negative coping skills within her story. And I'm looking forward to hearing Mitch's as well. And so there are positive coping mechanisms that we can use to help with our mental health and containing and staying on a mentally healthy track. So if you're listening in and maybe you are not experiencing these symptoms, but you want to help a friend, it's so important to recognize the warning signs and to share your concerns with them. I'm from Texas, like I told you guys, so we're all like the friendly state and we smile at everyone, and we always like, make sure that you're kind to everyone. And I definitely want you to be kind to everyone, but I also want you to be kind and knowledgeable and be able to give them information that's tangible and that they can use. So recognizing the warning signs and sharing your concerns with them is really important. Also encourage your friend to talk to a trusted adult, share resources. Some of the resources that we'll have at the end are really great, and that text line that I told you guys about. Include them in your social plans. Also get included in their social plans. If they love doing something, go do that with them. Help them stay positive. Encourage them to follow their treatment plan. And I really love this last one. Check in with them. Listen to them. Offer support. I have a group of friends who I met with from NAMI, actually, that we do this all the time. We might not talk every day, but we have each other when we need to. Just be a good friend. So when we were talking before, we talked about stigma. Stigma is the biggest reason why someone wouldn't get the help they need. Stigma can include anything such, as education. It could include not getting enough information about what's going on with you, just having negative talk about what mental health really is, just not knowing it at all. Judgment, bullying, all of those things are under stigma. So one of the ways that you can reduce stigma and take action is really talking about this presentation to family and friends today, or sharing it afterwards, or maybe even contacting your local affiliate. If you're a student and you want this for your class, and getting with an advisor and contacting your local affiliate, sharing links on social media, really, making sure that you're not using stigmatizing language, and you're also making sure that others around you aren't using stigmatizing language. And also wear that lime green. That's our color, like our mascot color. So wear that ribbon and tell people why. So guys, remember that mental health conditions are medical conditions, just like physical conditions. We talked about the leg breaking and what you would do and how that's much the same way. It's not anyone's fault. Knowing the warning signs is so important to breaking down stigma. Please know that you're not alone. All three of us are here to let you know that you're not alone, and there are so many more. Recovery is possible, and just like Katie said, it's not linear. I always say recovery is not perfection, but it's having the tools to help you through the hard times, and from that, there is hope. And finally, it takes one voice, just one, to end the silence, and you have that power to end the silence. So thank you guys so much for listening to me. I know that Katie and Mitch's story are so exciting, so I'm excited for you to hear Mitch's story. And I want you, if you have any more questions about anything that we talked about, NAMI.org is a great place to find information. These are the additional resources that I was telling you guys about: the NAMI helpline, the crisis text line, the suicide prevention line, the Trevor Project, which is for the LGBTQ+ community, which is great, and then a whole slew of websites. And then finally, thank you guys so much. Really enjoyed my time with you. And Mitch, I'm going to turn it over to you and put myself on mute.
All right. Thanks, Hannah. I really appreciate that presentation. I think you did an excellent job there. A lot of great information that you covered. And for everybody on the call, I hope you were able to jot down some notes and get some practical takeaways from the material presented there. Again, for everybody on the call, my name is Mitch. I'm 27 years old, and I currently live just outside of Denver, Colorado. Just a little bit about me, I strive to make time for cooking on a daily basis. I really kind of fluctuate between cuisines. I kind of keep with themes of the week. So Monday for me is Meatless Monday, and last night I made a tempeh risotto for my fiance and myself, and tonight is Taco Tuesday. So we're going to do pork green chili tacos. I got that in the slow cooker. I'm currently at work, but letting those kind of simmer. I certainly use my culinary passion to fuel my active lifestyle, and whether it's swimming, biking, running, doing all three on the same day, I definitely take advantage of the Colorado sunshine, and I also enjoy camping, skiing, and just simply spending time in the mountains. So that's just a little bit about me and just kind of some of my hobbies. So kind of dive into my story here, and even though I'm relatively young, for a good portion of my life, I've experienced thoughts that have tremendously affected my subsequent outlook and behavior, and I assumed in the ways in which my spiraling highs and negative lows were just a normal part of growing up as an adolescent in today's hyper-connected yet oh-so-distant society. And really throughout my years in middle school, but especially in high school, my internal dialogue was one that told me I wasn't good enough, that I shouldn't be called a talented and gifted student. I had no business competing athletically, as I was a failure as an athlete, and that I should keep to myself as I possess terrible social skills. But these false cognitions didn't really align with reality, but I continued to buy into the negative self-barrage, and this resulted in deliberate self-medication just to drown out those unwanted thoughts. But paradoxically, it led to the presentation of those thoughts in my life as my grades began to slip, as I lost interest in school completely. I had actually, in my junior year, walked away from lacrosse in the middle of the season and never looked back. You know, sports had been a cornerstone up until that point in my life, and socially I completely withdrew. I was definitely one of the kids who had my headphones in all the time. I would walk around in a hoodie, whether it was summer, winter, always with my hood up, never really wanting to engage with other people. And looking back at it now, I can honestly say that I truly lived a miserable existence in high school, and I really never lived up to my potential, and you know, I just kind of got by. And so fast forward a little bit, and I was able to get into a college, and you know, I was very excited about the prospect of a new location and, you know, that first year of college and just kind of all the things that you hear leading up to that huge first step. And, you know, I was really excited to just kind of redefine who I was. But unfortunately, these thoughts begin to kind of creep into my life, and, you know, thoughts that just completely hampered my self-esteem. But at this However, I really knew how to combat these oppressive beliefs with a particular substance, and truly with the autonomy and the unstructured environment that college affords, I delved even deeper into my habit. But it was very strange because at this point in time, I didn't really experience the same negative life circumstances, but I thrived in areas that I believed I wasn't competent in. For myself personally, I didn't have to go to any classes. I didn't do homework. I didn't study for exams, yet I would show up on test day and just ace them. Athletically, I actually walked onto the ski team and was the top skier in that discipline. And then socially, I became the life of the party, and it was something that, looking back as an introverted person, I don't know how I was ever that person. And it's just strange to see these changes, drastic changes in behavior that Hannah kind of hit on there, and knowing the warning signs that continue for 2 weeks here. So I really was able to function at a very high level, and underlying all of this, I wasn't sleeping very much. I certainly just enjoyed how productive I was, and it was a great time. But unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse. And in the fall of 2012, I began experiencing different type of thoughts that were more disturbing in nature. And as a result of my altered thinking, and in conjunction with a series of unpredictable life events that I didn't know how to cope with at the time, I called my counselor. I had been on medication and seen a therapist since I was about 12 or 13 years old. And so I realized something was wrong, and I reached out for an emergency session. But to that person, I verbally disclosed that I had thoughts of threats against others. And in the throes of psychosis, these unprecedented false delusions were interpreted as credible, and I was subsequently hospitalized, placed on a 72-hour mental health hold, which was extended indefinitely. But because of what I said, it was reported to the authorities, and I was interviewed while I was in the hospital, and later I was incarcerated. So ultimately, I was given a diagnosis of bipolar disorder 2, which is a mental illness characterized by severe mood swings, repeated episodes of depression, and at least one episode of mania. Further, after consulting with mental health professionals, I came to understand that I had experienced first episode psychosis, which temporarily interferes with the brain's ability to make out reality and causes disruptions in thoughts and perceptions. And although the new diagnosis of bipolar disorder mainly came as a bit of a shock, the more that I researched and kind of did my own self-education about the disease, the more I was able to recognize various periods in my life and really kind of come to a place of acceptance. So I served about a year in a federal detention center. And to be honest, after I was released from that federal institution, I experienced a tremendous bout of depression. I believed that there was no hope for my future, that, I was just a burden to myself. I was living at my parents' house. At the height of it, I was sleeping 20 to 22 hours per day, only getting up to eat if I was able to manage that. And it was just, I lived a very, very poor existence. And, one of the kind of running themes here is suicide. And there's a tremendous amount of suicidal ideation. And I did kind of enact a plan, and I didn't take action on that, but it was a very low depression, and I was just so debilitated, no hope for the future, and just didn't think that myself in the circumstances that I had been in would ever succeed at all. But really through some family and some really close friends who never gave up on me. They were there, they were asking how I was doing, even when I didn't like it. And I don't know if any of the parents can associate with that, if you're asking your kids, or if any of the kids feel that, your parents are being a little bit too intrusive, but they were continued to be there for me throughout it all. And so I came to a realization through their support that I'm responsible for my own mental health. And after consulting with various mental health professionals, I elected to have electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. And this is a procedure where controlled electric currents are passed through the brain while the person's under general anesthesia. That being said, this modality is only implemented when treatments such as medication and therapy have been shown to be ineffective. But when reflecting on what's been effective for me over the past few years, ECT was really the impetus that kind of served for me to be able to take advantage of the holistic approach that I have in place to combat this illness. So I've been exceptionally stringent with my new diagnosis, with adhering to what medication protocols my psychiatrist and I determines appropriate for me at any given period in time. I will go ahead and say that throughout, kind of COVID and the onset of that, I actually was in the process of tapering back on one medication, and when that did, kind of come, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit, I did start to begin to taper back up to my original dose just to have that in place as a safety net. More so, I also meet with a psychologist with whom I explore and understand feelings and gain coping skills. And talk therapy for me, really post-incarceration, was super important, where I was meeting maybe once a week. Now I probably meet with that individual just once a month, and I kind of like to call it my mental health checkup. Just as you would go to the doctors and get a physical exam, I do that about once a month now. Outside of those standard treatments, I've been adamant about keeping myself in excellent physical health by prioritizing sleep. I know it might sound lame to some of y'all on the call. I usually get 9 to 10 hours of sleep, and that's what I function on, and I do very well with that. I abstain from all substances as they don't interact with me. I learn about and apply principles of nutrition, and then I also engage in copious amounts of exercise. And then aside from the mind and body approaches, I've really been blessed with a strong support network of family members and close friends who I can turn to in times of need and have been there to encourage and love me all along this journey. I recently got engaged in February, and I'm so happy that I have someone that I get to spend the rest of my life with. So yeah, we're planning our wedding for November, and we're going to have it regardless of kind of what else is going on. But last and certainly not least, my Christian faith has been absolutely instrumental to my success. And through various outlets, my faith has blossomed and afforded me a peace unlike any other, trusting that everything that is manifested in my life has done so for a specific reason. So my wellness routine, as I've had it established, has really faced a tremendous challenge with this coronavirus that we now find ourselves in. And really with the onset of the pandemic, I admittedly discounted that this virus would really have as much of an impact as it has. But when schools and businesses started closing, and really when many of my family members began working from home, and they're still currently working from home, I really kind of came to the realization that the coronavirus wouldn't just define 2020, but it would be one of the pivotal events in modern history for us. And fortunately, I had existing strategies that I just kind of talked about and that really well-defined routine. I get into a good weekly cadence, and I think that's one thing that's really been shown to be efficacious for bipolar disorder. And so through this season of unpredictableness, I've stayed very stable. I haven't really fluctuated with my moods and been very grateful for that. I'm definitely fortunate to be employed in a critical industry, and so I have not worked at home from all. But I've been able to really build my routine by going to work on a regular Monday through Friday schedule, and then just having structure and then just activity throughout the day is vital for me to function optimally. So something that I've personally done to really kind of simplify and focus in this COVID era is to sit down at the beginning of every week. Sunday, kind of my day of rest. I like to meal prep. I work out quite a bit, and then I also sit down and I take the time to plan every single hour of my week for the week ahead. It's tedious, yes, but it really gives me something to look forward to, knowing that, okay, I got this going the next hour, or I got this going, and it really just kind of keeps me motivated. Another strategy that I've continued to implement at this point in time is to abstain from as much media as possible. I don't watch TV or movies, anything like that. I don't have any subscription service. I have a TV to watch DVDs while I'm on the bike trainer. That's about it. I really don't read articles online, and I really limit myself to about 10 or 15 minutes of what I call Facebook Friday, just to kind of catch up with my friends and see how they're doing, how their weeks have been. But I realized that my experience kind of isn't quote-unquote normal in this abnormal world, but it's really clear that even in the midst of pandemic, the coping strategies that I have in place that work well for me have enabled me to thrive. I've also come to understand that recovery is an ongoing process, just as one needs to attend to their physical health, right? You can't just drink one kale smoothie, go to the gym, work out once, and be set for life. Staying on top of your mental well-being is also a continual undertaking. And I certainly still experience times in my life where things aren't all rosy, but now I possess an arsenal of healthy coping mechanisms to combat these difficult times. And throughout my recovery, I've had different conceptions of success. early on, like I said, I had to celebrate the little things, like getting out of bed, taking care of myself, doing a shower, eating food. Those were huge steps, and it allowed me to kind of get me to a place where I can take on more. So I did mention early on, talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy was instrumental for me. And I incorporated that back into my routine, and it tremendously enhanced my self-esteem and enabled me to take on a part-time job. I re-enrolled in classes at a local community college, and I even trained for a half marathon with my cousin who kind of prompted me to do so. Having success in those endeavors continued to bolster my self-esteem, and it really furthered my personal development, which contributed to me taking on even more. And even though I've achieved things over the past few years that are ostensibly successful, such as graduating summa cum laude with a degree in psychology and nutrition, qualifying and competing in the Boston Marathon, or working hard professionally, turning that part-time job into my full-fledged career, I've actually come to a different conception of what success is. Rather than equating success with the achievement-oriented acquisition of fancy titles or material goods, for me, success can be distilled into a simple equation. So success is happiness plus constant improvement plus contribution to others. And as such, I strive to be content in all situations. I view challenges as opportunities for growth, and I serve others to demonstrate the love that has been reciprocated to me. So I have a great deal of hope for the future, and despite my unfortunate circumstances, I've adopted an optimistic outlook. And in sharing my story today, I hope to have alleviated some of the myths surrounding mental illness, and really longer term, I hope that we as a society can overcome stigma and begin to embrace those living with mental illness in a similar manner in which we treat persons with who are afflicted by physical maladies. So that's kind of my story, and then I'm going to pass it off to Jennifer at this point in time, and we're going to open it up for some Q&A. Jennifer?
Thank you, Mitch, and thank you, Hannah and Katie. What an amazing presentation. I really appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to do this for all of us, and for sharing your stories and really helping everyone who's on the webinar understand a little bit more about what mental health conditions look like, how they might present themselves right now in the pandemic, even for individuals who've never really noticed any symptoms. So with that, I am going to pull up some of the questions. Start though, there were just some general questions, so I'm going to cover those really quickly before I start to give some questions to our panelists. The PowerPoint slides and the different documents that Hannah talked about in her presentation, those will be emailed to you in the follow-up email that should be going out in the next day or two, so please keep an eye out for those. Someone did also ask about where some of the statistics came from in the PowerPoint presentation. To find all of the citations for those statistics, you can go to NAMI.org/MHstats. I believe we have Suzanne helping post those links for us, so if she could post that again, you all are more than welcome to go there and check out these stats as well as many others about mental health. Will there be a certificate of attendance emailed to participants? We can do that. We will go ahead and put a certificate in with the follow-up email that you all can use. And I think that's most of the general questions. So I will move on to some of the other questions for our panelists. So first one, Katie and Mitch and Hannah, I guess all of you can kind of weigh in on this if you'd like, but we had a question come in that as an educator, what can they be doing to effectively help students during this time without being overbearing? You just want to make sure you unmute. Katie.
Yeah, I will say that I'm in my master's degree right now in mental health counseling. I really love how my professors have gone about this, and I'll use them as an example because they're not only professors, but they're also therapists. So I'm trusting that they're doing a good job. But actually, when we have class every week virtually, every professor, they take the first 5 to 10 minutes and they say, how is everybody doing? How are you really doing? Or, you know, name whichever event in 2020 happened this year. They'll say, this thing happened this week. How is everyone doing with that? You know, this is a safe space to talk to us. And we take that 5-10 minutes to kind of come together as a community and cultivate that community virtually to be open. And then we dive into the material for the week. So that's a way that they've not been overbearing, but simply reminded us that even though we are virtual right now, we still want to have community and relationship with you and make sure that you're doing okay as students. So.
That's great. Hannah, did you want to unmute?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, so I was a teacher. I don't know if I announced this, but I was a teacher for 5 years. I taught high school. And one of our presentations, Ending the Silence for Staff, really talks about connecting with the families as well. And even as we're going virtually and we're doing everything kind of via webinars and things like that, it's still important to keep up with that attendance and kind of see, you know, are students kind of going up or down in their grades and monitoring those same things that you would inside the classroom and reaching out to those students as well as the families if you feel like there is something that you know, that needs to be helped with. And sometimes a simple, like Katie was just saying, like a simple, like, hey, you know, this is a safe place is really helpful as well. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Great. Thank you for that, Hannah. Did anybody have any other comments to that question? Great. So next question, Mitch, is for you. I know I was definitely starting to get hungry for tacos as you were talking about all the meals you've been making and the cooking you've been doing. Somebody wanted to know, where do you find all of your recipes, or do you just do this on your own?
Yeah, so I had spoken a little bit about, I do have a degree in nutrition in psychology, and so really I was very blessed to be able to attend Metropolitan State University in Denver, and they actually have a pretty big culinary department there, and so I actually took quite a few nutrition courses that were practical. So I really kind of started in there, just kind of getting the basics down for different type of culinary cuisines. So just basic French cooking, kind of Asian cooking, and then Italian cooking. Those are 3 really good places to start. And then from there, I mean, it's just kind of flavor what you like. I love experimenting. I'm not a very creative person in terms of like art or music or anything like that, but the kitchen is really where I can flex that creative muscle. So as long as you have a good spice jar, you know, you can definitely go from there. I do like, I'll plug MyFitnessPal. I use that to track my foods, and they have great healthy recipes there as well.
Great. Thank you, Katie and Hannah. Have you all found cooking or any new hobbies during this pandemic that you've enjoyed doing?
Yes, I used to love cooking. I'm also a writer, Hannah. So I used to have a cooking blog back when I had time before college took over everything. So with all my free time, I've also gotten into cooking. I've dived more into yoga, and I've had time to do some commissioned pieces of art. So I've been trying also to make use of my time and like Mitch said, flex that creative muscle, which is so healthy. So.
And I'll be honest, I haven't had much free time to find new activities, but I'm building miniature houses, and my daughter is very happy with me about that. But yes, I've been homeschooling and working, so building miniature houses, but not cooking as much as possible.
I'm surprised that you have time to build miniature houses. I will applaud you for that. I can understand the homeschooling for sure.
Thank you.
I know, Mitch and Katie, you you had limited time to share your stories and then also be able to talk about some of the different things you've been doing during COVID-19. But do you have any other coping strategies maybe that you know of, other friends and family that they use, or some additional ones that you hadn't mentioned that people can offer up to their loved ones for getting through this?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly that whatever you love to do, it can be really as weird and quirky and unheard of as you want. I have had a lot of friends start doing all kinds of things that I'm like, that's really interesting. You keep doing that, just you, not me. Like, for instance, my boyfriend, he loves history, loves American history, and he is not in college anymore. He graduated. And in this time of unemployment, unfortunately, he has created American history presentations that he pretty much just shows me and his family, and he wears a suit jacket, and we support him. This is his form of coping through this time. So just inspiration for you.
One thing that I know has been tremendously helpful, being in Colorado, a lot of active people around, just getting outside, getting fresh air. I think that is a great way. It's been awesome to see just a lot of people out walking in the neighborhoods. So I think, even if you're, not meeting the recommended 5 days per week, it's 30 minutes, just getting outside and walking, doing something physical. Now that, people don't have to commute and spending the time is something great, not only to get outside and kind of get moving, but just to refresh yourself with some of that fresh air.
Definitely, definitely. I know many people are getting outside more. I found out recently in our area, there's no bikes for sale anywhere. All of the bikes have gone. It looks like Mitch is running into that as well. So yes, fresh air is always good. Another question that came in, and this can go to any one of you, that someone, so they said, I'm in need of professional help, but my mom wouldn't ever let me go and get that help. What can I do about it? Do you have anything that you can think of from your story that might help this person?
Yeah, I'll say to whoever that person is, I'm with you. I asked my mom for years to get me help until, I was at my breaking point and I was at rock bottom, and we had no choice but to get me help. So I'll just say for that person, know that you are not alone, and that whatever you're going through, man, it is so valid. It is so real. I would say that, like I think Hannah pointed out in our presentation, is find a trusted adult, whether it be an old coach, an old teacher, a relative, or a friend's parent. Find someone to reach out to, and you can do research on finding like online support groups. If you're over the age of 18, therapists are doing telehealth right now, virtual therapy. And yeah, reach out to someone and do the things that you love. In the meantime, if it involves journaling to write your feelings out, or doing any type of art to really just get whatever's in here out here, so it's not getting bottled up. I'd encourage you to do that.
Thank you. Hannah and Mitch, did you have any comments?
I'll just say that I didn't tell a lot of my story, but I did I do have a story that started very young, and I used the resources at my school. So I used my counselor a lot for the things that I needed when I needed to talk through things. And another help is always the text line. I always say, if you need that, use it for any crisis that you're going through.
Great point. Thank you, Hannah. Another question that came in was, what if you go to therapy and you start to go and you feel gung-ho about it, you think it's going to be good for you, you go once and you just don't like it and you don't want to go back. Do you have any comments or any help around that that you've experienced yourself?
Yeah, Hannah, did you want to go first?
Oh, it doesn't matter. I was just like nodding, and I do have experience, but I didn't want to talk right after I talked already. So.
Same. That's why I tried to get you to do it first.
All I was going to say is that I've been there. I've had someone that, you know, I went once and it was not my cup of tea. So I had to find someone different. And it was, wow, it was like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like. This is definitely what I need. And so, and as I've grown, I've had to change therapists as well. And the same with psychiatrists. I had to advocate for myself at that level as well. So if you don't like the first one, try one more. And never be afraid to ask questions in that beginning process when you're calling all of them to see if they're the right fit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that finding the therapist that you can connect with, you feel safe opening up to, whether you know, they have like this similar personality that you have, is so important, because some therapists just aren't going to be a right fit, but I don't think that means that therapy is not a right fit. And like we said in the presentation, there are so many forms of therapy, and also what I think is helpful is find your local NAMI or another local mental health organization and give them a call, and they are a resource hub, and they have a lot of connections in the community and can tell you about groups that are meeting, certain things that are going on even virtually right now. So yeah. Oh, Jennifer, I think you're still on mute.
Oh, darn. I was doing so well going back and forth with the mute. Sorry about that. I was just seeing if anybody else had any other comments on that topic. Okay, so another question that we received was around, so they asked, what is the role of acceptance in supporting your mental health or the mental health of a loved one, friend, family member?
So for me, I mean, acceptance isn't something that you can force upon anybody, unfortunately. And I think for me in my own story, it's a long road, and it still is one that I'm navigating every day. I don't think you ever arrive at full acceptance. You know, there's a lot of self-work that goes into that. But for, you know, how to support somebody who has been diagnosed with a mental illness, is to, I always go to education, and just kind of educating yourself on the disorder. I believe that NAMI has a wonderful resource, how to support a loved one, on the main website there. I don't remember the title offhand, but it's a free PDF that you can download. That would be very helpful. And then really, the more that I was able to identify with some of the symptoms, then I came to a place of acceptance. It's like, okay, you know, I'm not going to be defined by this label. I'm an individual living with a mental illness, but I can live with that.
Thank you, Mitch. That was very helpful. Very insightful as well. Katie, Hannah, anything?
I'll just put in that peer-to-peer was really helpful for me. And I know that family-to-family has been really helpful for other people. So for me, peer-to-peer is like a recovery toolkit, right? And it really helps with understanding, much like what Mitch was saying. So that was kind of the process that that helped me, or one of the processes that helped me.
Yeah, I was seconding what Mitch said, that I think when we think of self-acceptance, we suddenly feel like, well, I am identified now by this illness, or this is my identity, and it's not. It's something, like Mitch said, that we're struggling with, that we're living with, just like any other health condition, physical health condition. And I think it begins with, when it comes to ourselves, compassion for ourselves. And when it comes to someone else, empathy for that person, of understanding, oh my gosh, that must be so hard. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you. We still have a lot of great questions coming in, so if you see me dodging my eyes to another screen, thank you everyone for the interaction. A question that just came in: as a teenager, did any of you show defiance and anger towards your parents? And if so, what could they have done to help?
Hey, Jennifer, I think, yeah, I saw that one from Teresa directed kind of at me. I was typing my response, oddly enough, as you mentioned that. But I was definitely defiant as a teenager, and I had a tremendous amount of anger as well. I think part of that was because I was just so socially distant that when I would come home, I would take out my, repression on them. I didn't really put this in my story, but both of my parents are actually therapists. And so they would always want to sit down and have a talk every day. And that was not helpful for me at all. There were days where I would just want to come home and just go to my room. And I had crying spells throughout high school. And, for me, that was a shameful experience if, I got walked in and, I was crying, supposed to be a man and tough. And kind of fall into that hegemonic masculinity that we experience. But really, I think what the most helpful thing would have been, and this is something that I was just, kind of on the verge of, but texting. I think texting is a great platform to at least open up the conversation and, begin to actually get in touch with them. And, it can be very low key, and it really removes the human element where tempers flare. And it could be, even scheduling a talk, whereas, on the weekend, every Saturday at 2:00 p.m., for example, we're going to sit down and just kind of review the week and, very casual, whereas I was just very emotional and, there would be days when I would come home and punch holes in the wall. And those times were definitely where I would have appreciated like a text message rather than getting up in my face and kind of escalating the situation.
Very helpful. Thank you, Mitch. Katie and Hannah, did you have anything to add before we move on to the next question? Okay. One of the next questions that came in was, can anyone speak to the fear about reaching out for help for the first time? This can be a big barrier, especially for younger people, because they're scared, they might be ashamed, and how do we encourage them to do it anyway, and why it's so important?
I mean, I definitely can speak to the fear of reaching out and the stigma that I've placed upon myself and the stigma that I placed upon it, but it didn't come always as a young adult. It came much like Mitch was talking about, like there are different types of, or different times in my life where recovery happened in different ways. And when I became a mom, I was really ashamed of having a mental health condition. And so I refused to believe it as if it's like Disney World. And it was really hard to go and get help. It was by the grace of my family, and later finding NAMI that I was willing to get the proper treatment that I needed. And it was scary, but it was taking that first step, making those phone calls to my family who I knew would love me regardless, that really helped me.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. Any other comments on making that first reach out? We have a few more minutes to cover a couple more questions.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly that reaching out for help might just save your life. It might just be one of the best things you ever do for yourself, or if it's for your child, the best thing you ever do for them. And Hannah said something in the presentation that I really loved. When we tell someone and we have maybe a poor experience, it can discourage us from ever telling anyone ever again. But try again. Find someone who's going to listen, who's going to help, who's going to meet you in a place of compassion and acceptance like we've talked about.
That's great. Thank you, Katie. One question that came in, this might be our final question. Katie, specifically in terms of what you're going to school for and your master's in counseling, have you seen any stigma around that professional arena in terms of therapy?
have I seen any stigma around mental health or around going to therapy?
Around mental health. So do you see stigma there as you're in your doing your master's?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say from other professionals, really I've just seen it with fellow students. I think that just is because of lack of education, which is why I think even our NAMI classes, peer-to-peer, family-to-family basics is so important, is because education can be such a catalyst in breaking stigma and in understanding really what's going on in people's lives, in their brains. And I would say education is across the board. I've also worked as a behavioral health technician at a substance abuse and eating disorder hospital or a rehab. And I saw a lot of stigma there as people who didn't understand addiction. They didn't understand substance abuse. They didn't understand that addiction and substance abuse, there's a problem underneath that problem. And that's the one that we need to address, even in fellow staff members. But I will say with the help of education, I think we are slowly breaking away stigma in our country as a whole. So, good.
That's great. Thank you, Katie. Katie, Hannah, Mitch, thank you so much. We appreciate all of your sharing today and really getting down into some of the more raw pieces of your life and how sharing your stories has really been able to educate more people. We have had a couple of questions just come in about the NAMI Ending the Silence presentation in general. We are offering this presentation virtually in some of our local affiliates and states. So if you just go to nami.org/local, hopefully someone put that in the chat for me, that you can go there and check with your affiliate to see if they're doing these presentations. And that can be done for middle school students, high school students, family members, as well as school staff members. And as always, you can just go to the NAMI.org website to learn more about our programs as well. Finally, I'd like to pass it back over to our CEO, Dan Gillison, to give some final words.
Thanks, Jennifer. And I want to start out by, first of all, recognizing the staff that put this together and that is working behind the scenes along with Jennifer to do this. Thank you to each and every one of you all, because I get to represent you, and I'm representing Hannah, Katie, and Mitch right now. And I just want to thank you for your sharing your stories and being vulnerable, because you've shown your strength. Vulnerability reveals strength. It doesn't reveal weakness. And I want to just say that each one of you, it's outstanding to listen to your bodies of work and what you've navigated. I think I heard Mitch use the word navigate. Mitch, you also mentioned you got engaged in February. You're getting married in November. Well, 38 years ago, I get married in November. So 38 years ago. And I'm also a bit of my therapy is cooking. I love to get in the kitchen and do that. Katie, you're a wonderful artist, and with the work that some of the art that you've done, I would love to see it. And Hannah, as a mom, and as your daughter said, well, I can play with you, but you've got to stay 6 feet apart. I just enjoyed each one of your stories and how authentic you are in what you do. And to all the participants, I want to say to all of you all, the audience, that if you're looking to make a difference, in addition to support for yourselves, look for your local NAMI. There is a way for you to get engaged. There is a way for you to make a difference, and we would welcome your involvement. We have a strategic plan that really ties into all three of our experts in their conversations, from early intervention. You all know that it takes over 11 years from the time that you first see the symptoms to before someone gets help. So you can be 14 and you don't get help until you're 25. The other one is looking at the justice system and our young people getting involved in that system. As Mitch talked about, we would like to divert our folks from that system. So Mitch, thank you for sharing that. And last but not least, I want to mention to you all a couple of events that are coming up. First and foremost, on Tuesday, July 14th at our NAMI convention, that will be our first virtual convention and my first NAMI convention, we will have a plenary with PBS, and they will be kicking off launching their national program in partnership with us, which is their Youth Mental Health Project. We would love for you to register for NAMICon. It is free. We decided not to have a registration fee this year, and that we wanted everyone to participate. We have set it up where people can contribute if they'd like, but we really are not looking for that. We're looking for people to register and participate. Tuesday the 14th is the Youth Mental Health Project. The conference, the convention, is actually Monday and Tuesday, 13th and 14th. The other things are 3 events. This Thursday, the 25th, from 4 to 5:30 Eastern Standard Time, NAMI's Ask the Expert webinar, which is for outside audiences. The topic will be Impact of Racism and Trauma on Black mental health. The presenter will be Dr. Christine Crawford out of Boston Medical Center, and she has some great insight. And she's also a volunteer at NAMI there in Boston. Then we have on the 16th of July, Dr. Arthur Stewart will be talking to health care disparities in minorities. Dr. Stewart is the past president of the American Psychiatric Association, and she is the first African-American woman to preside over that 39,000 member organization. Last but not least, and Hannah would appreciate this one, on the 27th of August from 4 to 5:30, we'll have an Ask the Expert that the topic will be helping kids adjust to returning to school after their school year was interrupted by COVID. And we have a psychologist, Katie and Mitch, Dr. Megan Walls, that will be presenting that one. So that's a little bit about what's going on. I think in closing, Katie opened up and she closed her remarks by saying NAMI cares. And what I would offer to you is that there's nothing more authentic than her sharing that with you. And I often say people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And these 3 people here just demonstrated that to you. And it's all about leadership. So I want to, just compliment Jennifer, because it's Jennifer's leadership that is bringing this to you all on today. So Jennifer, thank you. And remember, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I just wanted to say that NAMI does care, and these 3 incredibly talented folks right here are a demonstration of that. And you guys are champions. So thank you for giving your talent to us on today and every day. So thank you.